All right, we talked yesterday about the case of James. James is the 6-year-old child in Texas at the center of a custody dispute. His mother wants him to be a girl named Luna and insists that he's transgender, puts him in dresses, all that stuff. But then when he's with his dad, James just wants to be James, and he wants to be a boy and do boy things and go by the name James. He doesn't want to wear dresses. Now his dad is trying to rescue him from all this madness and let him just be a boy like he is and like he wants to be. But the mom is accusing the dad of child abuse. The mom, who is trying to turn her son into a girl, is accusing the dad, who wants his son to just be his son, of child abuse for refusing to affirm James's alleged transgender identity. Now, I already made my points about this case, and I'm sure it wouldn't shock you. You won't be shocked to learn that I side with the dad very strongly. I think this child is being exploited and abused by the people who are trying to foist transgenderism on him. Not just his mother, but apparently his therapists. But there's one other point about all this that I didn't make yesterday, and I think that needs to be made. So I want you to think about this. A lot of people on the left, especially the militants in the LGBT camp, so especially the LGBT activists, they insist that children as young as James, as young as 6 years old, he's 6, children even as young as 5 or even 3, kids really at any age, they say, possess the knowledge and the foresight and the wisdom and the power to choose their own gender. So the left has no problem with the idea of an elementary school boy transitioning into a girl. They say, well, if that's what he chooses, then it's okay. They have no problem even with young kids taking drugs, puberty blockers, hormones, to essentially chemically castrate themselves, even if temporarily, in order to facilitate this transition. They think that kids can consent to that. Now, this raises a very important question, I think. If a child is too young to consent to having sex, how is he at the same time old enough to consent to changing his sex? I mean, the consent laws are based on the correct idea that children do not have the mental or physical capacity to really fully consent to sexual activity. They are not able to consent to it because they don't have a full concept of what it even is. And because they're young kids, they also don't have the power in any situation to consent, to say no. So that's why we have the consent age where it is. That's why we say that kids can't consent. But if they don't have that capacity, how are they possibly able to choose to transition? If they can't choose to have sex, how can they choose to transition? How do they have, if they don't have the wisdom and the knowledge and all of that, and the maturity for one of those things, how do they have it for the other? So obviously there's a contradiction here. The people that are pushing transgenderism on kids are also at the same time, by necessity, pushing an entirely different idea about consent and about the mental capacities and the maturity of children. Which is why I believe the people that are pushing transgenderism will soon enough be pushing pedophilia. The two things kind of go hand in hand. Because in order to make their case that kids can make this choice, they have to tell us that actually, no, kids have all the knowledge and power and maturity that they need. So when pedophilia is normalized in our culture, and I think that it will be soon enough, this is the vehicle by which it will reach that state of normalization. And this is the reason why. This is one of the reasons why this issue really matters. This is why it's important. Because what we're seeing here is an attack on kids, an attack on childhood. And it's not going to stop with just this. It's not going to stop with just the transgender stuff. Nothing ever stops. You know, you never get to a point, especially with the left, they never stop. If you've noticed that once they achieve one thing, they get to one landmark, they're going to want to go on to the next. That's how it always works. So soon enough, the people that are saying that kids are old enough to consent to changing their sex will also be arguing that kids are old enough to consent to having sex. And this is not some kind of like far-fetched scenario, okay? Pedophilia has been in the past and is now today in some cultures considered normal. Ancient pagan cultures had no problem with it. It's a relatively normal practice in some parts of the world even today. So it's by no means impossible or even implausible that we in our culture could slide back into that state of things. But there has to be a catalyst for it. There has to be something that sparks the change. And I think this is it. This is what will spark it. And so this is why we need to pay attention. Okay, a couple other things I want